Welcome to another episode of Two Drink Maximum, the show over two drinks and nothing more. I'm your co-host, Shane Byerly.
I'm your other co-host, Chase Baxter.
Welcome, everybody. We are so excited today to have a very special guest with us, Gloria Salas, who is the governor-elect of District 9 of Zonta International. Gloria, thank you so much for stopping by. We're excited to have you.
Yes. Well, thank you for asking.
Absolutely. So as we generally like to start our show, the question we're going to ask you first is, what are we drinking this afternoon?
Please.
Ooh, a 2022 Pino Noir.
Yes, Pino Noir. And
another wine guest.
Another wine guest, which is great. Wine is sophisticated. It's classy.
Exactly.
For those who want to play at home, we picked a Rayburn Pinot Noir, which is from, I think, Sonoma County. It was recommended from a friend of mine. So hopefully it's good. I'm going to have a sip and try it now. Let's see.
Gotta smell it first.
Oh, that's right. You got to
shake it around in the glass, apparently.
It's very good. Yeah. So why did you pick Pinot Noir? Does the wine have a particular meaning or special memory for you?
Yes, kind of, sort of like.
Okay.
Well, I have to tell you the story. I grew up, I used to watch my father drink just a small little glass of red wine. I did not know what it was, but it looked so pretty. And I would ask him and he would say, no, 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 no. Finally, I must have been, I don't know, by then maybe 9 or 10 years old. And he says, okay, take a sip. I took a sip. Oh my God, it was the nastiest thing I have ever tasted.
Of course, yeah.
And so I never, ever had any alcohol until I was 31 years old when I went to Germany.
That's impressive.
My sisters were living there at the time, and they took me around to the different bars and taverns.
Yeah.
Had
That's a
wine.
good place to start.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I had warm beer.
Yeah.
And I really liked it. And so then one of my sisters introduced me to wine, but white wine. And it was, what's the white wine?
Zinfandel or Chardonnay?
Chardonnay, thank you.
Chardonnay, yeah.
God bless you. Chardonnay. And that's what I would drink, was white wine.
Yeah.
And then she introduced me to New Zealand white wine from Marlborough country. I loved it.
Yeah.
But I went to a party and they somebody brought a bottle and it was Pinot.
Yeah.
And I took it and I took a sip and I thought, oh my God, this is the best wine I've ever had. And it had an aftertaste of almost caramel, like caramel candy. And I went to the hostess and I said, where's the bottle and where did you buy it? And she said, I didn't buy any wine. It was brought by one of the guests, and I don't know where the bottle is. I have been on an elusive hunt for that.
It's a mystery wine.
It's a mystery wine. It's still, and I love, right now I'm drinking something from Quill, if I may mention that.
Absolutely.
And it's a Pinot as well, but I've just come to enjoy it, especially with the dark piece of chocolate.
Yeah.
Piece of dark chocolate.
Wine and chocolate are a good pair. Well, hopefully this is to your satisfaction. So very good. Well, again, thank you so much for joining us. So as we kind of mentioned before, so you are now the governor-elect of Zonta International, which is
District 9.
District 9, absolutely. Which is a program and organization that we were unfamiliar with until we were introduced to you. And as we started to do some research, we were just absolutely blown away by all the things that your organization does. But for those listeners who might not be familiar, can you kind of walk us through in a general sense what Zonta International does, what they stand for?
Well, first of all, do you have 4 hours? Because this is my passion. I very much enjoy. I've only been a member for 10 years. But Zonta International is obviously an international organization that was started in 1919 by women, business women who tried to join Rotary or some of the male-oriented organizations, but were told no women were allowed. And so they decided to support themselves, and it started out as the Confederation of Zonta Clubs, and then eventually started in Buffalo, New York, and then it went to Canada and started growing and growing. And we have, at the moment, I believe, over 61 countries.
Wow.
We are trying to get back into Mexico. We just opened a club in Rwanda. We are looking into Madagascar. We are, now I think has been put on hold into Israel. So we have them in India, Taiwan, the Republic of China, Taiwan. We have, I believe, in Burma. So we have clubs all over. Our main purpose is to build a better world for women and girls, to empower women and girls, to help ourselves, achieve gender parity, gender equality. And sometimes I think in our country, we were seeing a lot of that in the 70s. I remember Gloria Steinem and the women's movement and how long it took us to get so many states to vote to ratify the ERA. And then now it's stopped. And this is 2024.
Yeah, there's some, the pendulum's moving a little backwards.
Yeah, slightly, yes.
It does feel like that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, but one of the other things that we are also involved in is child trafficking, human trafficking, especially as it pertains to women and girls, labor trafficking for women and girls, child marriage. I bet you did not know that California does not have a law against child marriage.
We absolutely didn't. This was a discussion we had in our pre-show thing.
Yeah, absolutely. That was shocking to learn. I mean, how can that be?
Especially in California, which is touted to be a very progressive state.
Yeah.
We've come close, but at some point in time, we just had a bill that was pulled at the last moment. The last time it was introduced, I believe it was by a senator up north. I want to say Jerry Hill. I may be mistaken, but it was because one of his constituents had come to him because she was a child bride and said there has to be a law that allows 18 as the floor with no exceptions. And so he introduced it, but then all of a sudden there were other organizations that were fighting against it. I don't know why.
How do you make that argument?
Well, there are some organizations that believe that even a child should have the right to pursue happiness and liberty. And if she feels happy in getting married at 13 or 12, then that's her right. But so we've been fighting it for...
But they can't vote.
But they can't vote. They can't get a divorce. They can't enter into any legal contract.
You have all these other legal issues that immediately jump up.
Exactly. So we do a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the specifically on child marriage, one of the statistics that we found, right, while we were doing a little bit of research, is that globally 1 in 5 girls are married before they're 18. I mean, that's an insane statistic, right? To just read out loud.
Absolutely. And then if you start taking into consideration human trafficking, I'm on the news list for the Department of Homeland Security and ICE, and they put out newsletters when they have convictions of those people, men and women, who have trafficked a child, and sometimes it's their own child. And a couple of cases have come across where they will sell their child to someone, someone who is of majority age. So it's usually someone over 21, over 31, and you have a child, who's 8, 9, 10 years old. So
I mean, that sounds so archaic and insane to be going on, at least in our nation. I mean, imagine across the globe with this stat, like that's a little easier to wrap your head around, but still a really wild fact of life, I guess.
Yes, and our local Zonta Club tries to have at least yearly, if not every other year, a seminar or a forum on human trafficking, and we invite those law enforcement personnel and survivor advocates to come and tell us, because there's still people who don't believe it's happening here. They believe it happens overseas or down south of the border. Right. But these statistics and these actual cases that are being retold to us by these agents, they're frightening. And especially since the pandemic, because children were in front of a screen for so many hours and the parents were working in another room, you don't know who's on the other side of that screen.
Yeah.
Who is that child talking to?
Internet's a big place.
It absolutely is. Yeah. So, I mean, when it comes to child trafficking, child marriage, I mean, obviously getting the word out is one thing, but what are some of the kind of plans of attacks, right, that Zonta uses to actually combat this issue, right, and to make it stop? You are the plan of attack. Hey, all right.
Well, locally, the Zonta Club of Burbank area, what we've done, and I'm so happy because I was just at a domestic violence task force meeting of which Zonta is a member. We have a seat at the table, and we were on the agenda was the ordinance that was passed unanimously by our city council regarding the human trafficking poster law. That is a law that was passed in California I think 2017, 2016, quite a few years ago, that requires certain businesses and industries to post an 8.5 by 11 flyer that says, do you feel, what is it? Are you alone? Are you afraid? And then it has the 888 human trafficking number right in the middle of it. And then they added another law that adds a text number as well. And if you go to the airports, at least in the women's bathroom, they do have them. And I talked to a TSA agent at the Salt Lake City airport, and he said, and in the men's room, they have them. So it's basically to alert victims who may feel that they are in a situation that they can't get out of.
Yeah.
And it gives them the ability to call this number. So California passed this law. Wonderful. Restaurants that are under the ABC have to post it. Hotels, motels, B&Bs are supposed to post it in a conspicuous location where the public can see it.
Sure.
Then you have railroad stations, bus stations. Metrolink is doing a really good job about this as well by posting it. And but the problem with this law was that there was no enforcement. So you could go anywhere where go anywhere in Burbank. Where they're selling alcohol, go into a massage parlor, you won't see those signs, or a hotel. And I've gone into some of them and they don't have them.
You're keeping them honest.
Yes. And so I had volunteered with the National Council of Jewish Women many years ago before the pandemic, and they had a poster compliance project where they asked volunteers, they trained you, and they asked volunteers to go 2 by 2 into the hotels, the gyms, the urgent care facilities, locations that were covered under this law. And we were to go in and ask them, and first we see on the outside whether that poster was there or not. And then we would go in and say, we notice that you don't have this poster. Most of the time they don't know anything about it. They've never received the letter. So we give them a copy of the letter that was sent to them. At that time it was City Attorney Mike Fuhr. And then we give them a copy of the poster so that they could put it up. And so I said, why aren't we doing this in Burbank? Where are the posters? It is a law. I contacted our police chief and I said, this is a law. Will you back me? And I sent him the copy of the law and he says, yes, obviously we're not in compliance. I will back you. So I started talking to city council members. I took it before them. The city attorney made a presentation a few months afterwards of what this law was so they would know what California intended. And then they said, okay, let's do it. City Attorney's Office has been working on it for quite a while because they're also working on a whole bunch of other things as well. But, and we said the Zonta Club of Burbank area, along with other nonprofits, will help. So when it came to City Council, the ordinance in its final form, it was voted 5-0 to go ahead and accept the ordinance. So we were, and it didn't happen until after midnight. And by then, several of my Zontian friends and I were like, oh my gosh, we have to go to work tomorrow. But they passed it. And so the city attorney has been working on the poster itself and also on the letter that's going out to all these businesses. So they and that's what we were listening to today, the final thing. They've got everything ready. Now we just have to stuff envelopes. So if if either of you are available when we do it, I'll let you know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, that'd be great. Doing some of our research, I mean, kind of some of the other areas of kind of issues that you guys kind of tackle is, I mean, obviously one of the things that the Zonta Club tackles is issues of gender inequality, right? And one of the statistics that kind of caught our eye, especially in the workforce, right, is that women represent 46% of all employment, but only 32% of manager positions, right? Or senior management positions. That seems to be a troubling statistic as well. What are some of the things that the Zonta Club does to kind of make that statistic well known and also to kind of promote more, more equality in the workplace?
Well, one of the things that we do, and each club is different in how they approach this.
Oh, gotcha.
Yes. And it depends on where they live. Salt Lake City has a different approach to how they address gender equity and child marriage. And what we do basically is we have information nights. A lot of clubs have come and meet us, wine nights, and then we have all the brochures and all the information available. This is what's happening. Burbank, I'm kind of proud to say, is you look at our city hall and you have a majority, for the first time, woman majority city council. You have an assistant city manager who is a woman. You have Parks and Rec director is a woman. So we have a lot of women in the city of Burbank.
Burbank's setting the trend.
Yes, it is. And so each time we go forward, for instance, we have Women's History Month. We make a presentation at City Council for those who are present and for those who are watching on television. And then when we have in August is International Day, August 26th, I think. But we also have another presentation, and we try to, in our legislation, the legislation that we back, we are non-political and non-sectarian. However, we do send letters of support for certain types of legislation that require or that is addressing gender inequities. So we look at those who are our senators and our assembly people who are representing us, and we say to them, this is the law that's coming down. We would love it if you support it. And we give them the reasons why. And just to kind of go a little bit off that track, but Susan Rubio, Senator Susan Rubio, had a law that I believe passed because it helped victims of domestic violence, women, female victims who had children, to be able to go into shelters, because at that point, because of the confidentiality, and they didn't want to give an address of where they had come from, many of them were turned away from shelters. And unfortunately, the numbers of homeless women with children because of domestic violence has been increasing. But gender equity is something that we are always at the forefront. Whether we put out blasts on our newsletter or on our website or Instagram, whatever it is, whoever's in charge of it, we'll put it out in terms of, especially when you get something in the news that is a step forward for women.
Yeah. I mean, Mexico just elected the first female president. So
Yeah.
that's exciting.
Yes. It's exciting. It all depends on which side of the, whether you wanted her to win or you wanted the other woman to win. Well, but at least they made progress. They made progress.
It's one step at a time, right? Some days it feels like just one step forward.
Forward is forward is forward. You
Yeah,
make it slow.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is.
So what does Zonta do to promote, you've mentioned it already, equity as well as equality? Because there's a slight difference in the world, and obviously not everything is a blanket statement for everyone in the world. So what have y'all done in the Burbank area to help facilitate that, or even globally as far as just an organization?
Well, in terms of equality, we are an organization of dedicated people, individuals, who believe in the mission. So whether you are a man, you are transgender, you are gay, you are lesbian, are you interested in the mission?
Right.
That's what we are concerned. And so we are inclusive. We are, we open our arms. If you are going to help us move women ahead, then we want you on our side.
Which feels like the way that volunteer work should be, right?
Yes.
It's,
Oh, absolutely.
Yes,
absolutely. And there is, and it was funny because that you asked that, because I went to a meeting, a Zonta meeting in another city, and there was a woman who came up to me who was gay, and she said, what does Zonta International, what is their philosophy on the LGBTQ question? And I said, what question? I said, do you believe in our mission? Do they believe in our mission? And she said, yes, wholeheartedly. Yeah. Then there is no question.
Right.
So you belong with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's great. That's good to know that Zonta is welcoming everybody with
big
open
umbrellas,
right?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Especially when you look around the world and where the Zonta clubs are located. We have 3 Zonta clubs in Ukraine. And if you were to look at my toes, they are the color of Ukraine's flags. And I thought it would be maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks, but it is now going into our 2.5 years.
Yes.
and we support them. Thankfully, they're on the west end of Ukraine, but they have also told us that at the start of the war, their community was 100,000 people. And when the war started, within a couple of weeks, the population of their town exploded to over 200,000.
Oh, wow.
And so they
Displaced
were
individuals.
displaced, and they were concerned as to, okay, how are we going to house them? Where are we going to put them? So those three clubs got together with the communities and were able to, who has a hotel room, who has an extra loft, and to try to help them, because it is, and that's the problem, that whenever there is a conflict of any size, who are the ones who suffer the most? Children and women.
Right.
Yes.
And, you hear stories, what's going on, not only in that war, but you have the war in some of the countries in Africa. And, it's the women and girls. But anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're always disproportionately affected, I would imagine. It doesn't matter where, whether it's Palestine or, all of those places. Good Lord. Well, I think that you guys are doing fantastic work getting the message out and actually getting, legislation out there to combat stuff. And we're in full support of what you guys do. And while Zonta seems to be the main focus of your activism and your volunteer work, certainly not all you do, right? In our research, we found that you've been involved with clothing drives and food drives and toy drives for children, all in our kind of local community, which is primarily here in Burbank. But are there other kind of areas of your activism that you enjoy participating in here in our local community that might just be more than Zonta, right? Things that we might not be aware of?
Well, let's see.
The fact you have to think about this means
that means
there's a lot.
There's a list.
Yeah.
I am a member of our Peace and Justice group at our church, and they are so behind me 100% in all the things that I bring to them. Like, for instance, if I say, we are collecting clothing for the women and children who are escaping the bombing in Artsakh, which happened in 2020. Between our church and other organizations in Zonta, and this was the pandemic, 2020, Zonta did not stop. And I don't know if there was any Zonta organization that actually stopped during 2020. What we did was we reached out to, and here's a shout out to Pastor Brandon Johnson at his First Christian Church, because he allowed us to use his driveway. Wow. And we had it out on social media. We are collecting clothes for this particular event, and it was for the victims in Artsakh, the women and children. And we gathered over 100 pounds of clothing, some of it still with the tags on it, coats, ski clothing.
That's great.
It was just wonderful. And we took it all to an Armenian foundation that has ties to one of our Zontians. And so that was a really big thing. And then, so our church was involved in that, and some of the other faith communities were involved in that besides Zonta. And Zontians were there, just stop your car, we're masked, we're gloved, and pop your trunk, and we'll take everything out. We won't talk to you. We won't get close to you, but we thank you. We did that.
We'll wave from a distance, right?
Yes.
I will say 100 pounds of clothes is either a lot of clothes or 3 pairs of Doc Marten boots. It's one or the other, right? I imagine it's the former. But
Yes. And this woman's garage was full of bags because she also reached out to other organizations. But we just did a magnificent job. And then you said other than Zonta, but we also were reading the reports that domestic violence went up and was going up in April of the pandemic.
Wow.
And
this is basically the second month,
the
right?
second month. And because you were
that was a big issue
enclosed with your abuser, regardless of what gender your abuser was, you were still enclosed. And I and some other Zontians, we reached out to the YWCA. Do you need anything? And they said our welcome pantry is dangerously low because they were picking women up from street corners, putting them in hotels or apartments, wherever they had a contract with someone. And so and we collected full-size shampoos, conditioners, deodorants, feminine hygiene products, products for children, and we delivered them, with our masks and whatnot. We delivered them. I don't know how many bags we had, 70, 75 bags.
Wow.
It's just that people would drive through the First Christian Church driveway and just drop off their stuff. And it was just amazing. And I always, whatever it is I'm doing with Zonta, I always let our Peace and Justice know, because then we put it out in our bulletin and we collect, as well as human trafficking seminars that we've done at the church. I'm on the board of the Burbank Armenian Association. So that's how I guess I got started, because of the clothing drive, and this was going on, and we tried to communicate not only the history but the culture of the Armenian people in Burbank to the rest of Burbank, and most of my friends are Armenian. So I'm on the board, and we've had quite a few networking events to bring in other people from the Burbank area and introduce them to Armenian businesses that you may not have known existed.
Sure.
And
how has the Burbank community, or how did the Burbank community respond to that? Were they welcoming, or?
Well, we were hoping for maybe 40 or 50 people to show up. We had 160 people who showed up, and 180 RSVPs. But, it was cold and I think drizzly that day. But we had a lot of people who came in to see, and it's interchanging ideas and businesses. It's like, oh, I didn't know you did a podcast. Well, I have some people here, and it's just sharing. And once you know that none of us are scary,
right?
that you could sit down and break bread and have a glass of wine.
Exactly.
What a fantastic idea.
Yes,
it sounds like a good idea.
Yes.
Well, I think the thing that I'm getting at is that your activism, your volunteer work has been so widespread and is so kind of outward reaching that it was, amazing for us to learn in our research that Assemblyman Laura Friedman nominated you, and you were awarded the Woman of the Year in 2022.
Woman of the Year.
Yeah. And which is astute listeners will perhaps notice that's why we said it was a Rayburn wine from 2022. That's why we picked the vintage 2022. What was that like? When you got that news, what was the ceremony like? How did that make you feel?
When I was elected lieutenant governor back in 2021, I said that my philosophy is Ubuntu. That is an African philosophy that says, I am because we are.
Sure.
So maybe it's my idea, but I can't take it to completion without a whole community. And so that's, and we collected medical items for Ukraine when maybe it was in the third or fourth month. And when I realized that we had 3 clubs in Ukraine, and what were we doing? So I Googled Ukrainian churches and saw that there was one right nearby in Hollywood. And I reached out to the pastor and I said, what can we do? I don't know what to buy. What can we do? And he said, we need medical items. He sent me a list of items on my phone, reached out to our members. I reached out to other organizations. I reached out to my church. And the Real Estate Association was so happy to let us use their driveway because we had a lot of people. And by the time we finished, there were 2 vans, or one SUV and 1 van that went over to the church, and we delivered everything to them. And thankfully, at that time, the California National Guard was going to pick it up and deliver it to Ukraine.
Yeah.
Great.
And so it's really, if you just listen to the news, I listen to NPR, and I listen what's going on, who needs what.
Yeah.
And I mention it to whether it's our church or one of the other organizations, because I also belong to the Burbank Business and Professional Organization, and they're against human trafficking. So that's what called me to them. It's, you just say somebody's in need.
Right.
And especially if it's women in need.
Yeah.
It's like, when you find yourself in this type of situation, whether it's war, human trafficking, who are you going to turn to? Where are you going to get the resources? But if they know they can go someplace and get resources because someone has provided to them, then to me, that's the icing on the cake, not an award, although I loved it.
It wasn't the worst thing.
Yes, it wasn't the worst thing.
Did it come as a total shock when you won the award, or did you have a little bit of an inside, like, hey, be by your phone tomorrow at 3 o'clock?
When I got the call, I don't think I was available at the time, and then she called because we were still working from home.
Too busy helping people.
And and I got the call when I finally returned it, and they told me, I said, "Oh, you really must be kidding. You don't mean it." And she said, "No, really." I said, "I can't accept." And it took them a while, and I felt so bad because my husband chided me he said, "Just say yes." I said, "But there are other people who do more that deserve it."
I imagine it's a very common thing in trying to award anyone that's active in philanthropy and
Yeah,
charity, where it's like, oh, no. Like the humility of it is an innate thing in these individuals most of the time.
Yeah,
so.
you can imagine trying to give away Oscars. Like, no, I don't want it. Like, or whatever.
If I could personally deliver these items, to someone in Ukraine and help them, if I had a talent like Chef Jose and cooking,
Jose Andres, right? Yeah.
If I were a nurse, if I were a doctor, I mean, I would be out there, but I'm not. And this is all I can do. So why give me an award? And Senator Portantino, the same thing, he gave me an award earlier this year for Women of Empowerment. How am I empowering someone except to someone on the other end?
Well, you're a fantastic example.
Right.
Like if people need examples, people need something to model themselves after, and you do incredible work across the board for everyone. It sounds like
now I could
beyond
spend 10 minutes arguing with you about this, but
you won't change my mind. You won't change my mind.
But I will say that it was an honor to receive it, and I was lucky because normally someone I work with told me that what usually happens is that you and a family member or however other members you can afford to send up with you to Sacramento, you go to Sacramento and receive this with all these other assembly people who are giving awards to their recipients. And because of the pandemic, we weren't doing it in Sacramento. And so she said, we'll do it on the steps of City Hall.
Yeah.
And because it was outdoors, then I was able to reach out to my church friends and to all the friends who could make it and to other organizations. And we had it, and I had a picture. I have a picture of all of us out there. My sister came down.
That's
and,
amazing.
So yeah, it was great.
And doesn't that feel a little bit more fitting that the community that you make such an impact in was there to celebrate you that day, right?
Yes, I loved it.
Yeah.
I absolutely loved it that they were all there. But no, and it's like I tell my husband, I said, gosh, if I were to win the lotto, I would know the first thing I would do before I even contacted a financial advisor or an attorney is to give a big chunk of it to Family Service Agency because they also help domestic violence victims.
Sure.
And they have, there's so much need in this world. And, it's whatever little bit I can do to help to ease someone's pain or discomfort, you're going to be
nothing.
There. Yeah. Yes, I will try. I will try to be there.
Well, speaking of people in need, I see three
discomforting situations.
I see 3 people in need of a refill. So we're going to take a quick break, and we will be right back after these short messages.
Be right back.
Chase, I don't know about you, but it does feel like ever since COVID hit, we spend so much time in our homes, and our homes have kind of become our office, and it's been this kind of weird blend of professional and home. I find that occasionally it is difficult to become creative in the house. Sometimes you got to get out and you got to find a different space to kind of let that creativity fly. We are excited to share with our listeners that if you are in the LA area, we have the solution for you. We are proudly sponsored by The Muse Rooms, which is a creative co-working space that is here. They have a Hollywood location and they have a Burbank location, 2 convenient locations for you, that is ready to serve all of your creative space needs. If you want to rent space for a day to work on that screenplay, or if you need to rent a conference room for a big meeting that you have with a team that doesn't meet regularly, the Muse Rooms has got you covered. It's a great space. It's a great owner. It's a great vibe too. It's just a really cool, you'll get points with the youngsters for being cool for renting out
It's the hip spot to be, indeed.
It definitely is. So give the Muse Rooms a check if you're for all of your creative co-working space needs at the Muse, MUSE rooms.com. And now let's move on to part 2 of the show.
Welcome back from the break. We have another glass of our Pino Noir, delicious wine poured up, and we still have Gloria Salas, governor-elect of the Zonta Club, District 9.
Not to be confused with the movie, which,
also a good movie. Complete side note. But we wanted to ask, coming back from this break, you've done an incredible amount of work with a wide variety of organizations, including Zonta, obviously. But where did you get your start, and what was some of your earliest work, and what drew you to that?
I learned at a young age and I learned by example, because my mother was one of those. She came to this country when she married my dad, did not speak English, and we were the first Latino family to move into that neighborhood. And people did not really like us. But my mother won them over because she cooked, and she was a fabulous cook. And she was always making some type of Mexican food and taking it to the neighbors.
I'm jealous I didn't live next to you as well. Yeah.
Oh, you would have been, yes. It got to the point then when people started talking to us and, what's your mom making for dinner tonight? And she would make, during Lent, she would make big, huge plates of cheese enchiladas on Fridays for the nuns. And then the priests would say, well, how come we don't get any? And so she would remake them for them. And she was always helping. Even though the language was a barrier, she was always helping. And we, some of our relatives, oh gosh, you should go out and interview my uncle. He and that's how I learned too, because he and his brother, my other uncle, marched with Cesar before Cesar was even a household name.
Wow.
Trying to get rights for the farm workers.
Yeah.
And they would always come down after they had been up in the Coachella Valley or wherever they were at that time, come down to get some of my mom's cooking and, take a couple of nights rest. And they would tell us stories. They said, you're complaining because you're eating just beans and, tacos or whatever, and you want something more. So let me tell you, there are people out there hunched over, and they're pulling the lettuce that your mother is cutting up for your taco. They're the ones. And do you think that they want to be there for 12, 14 hours? And so then I remember volunteering. A nun would pick me up and take me all the way to East LA to St. Anthony's, and I would help teach catechism. And, as long as she was able to pick me up, I would go teach catechism. So my earliest work was with the Burbank Human Relations Council. I knew a longtime friend introduced me to one of the main people on the board, Marcia Ramos, who is a 2-time mayor as well, former, and getting involved with that organization, which has been around since the 50s. And it's a human relations organization. We do work with the Los Angeles Commission on Human Relations. One of the earlier presidents was on the march with Martin Luther King.
Wow, nice.
And African American. And at that time, Burbank had... it was known that when it became sundown, that certain people left.
Gotcha.
And as a matter of fact, City Council
Did they
signed...
have actual sundown laws?
we just signed a sundown law, or an anti-sundown law.
Oh, wow.
It was done in 2019, 2020. It hangs in Burbank City Hall.
Goodness.
At the moment. And whether it was an actual law or it was an understood
Just
law,
called- yeah.
Right.
it was, you knew.
Sure.
And the Burbank Human Relations Council, basically, bottom line, is to be inclusive.
Sure.
We accept everyone, not just in the organization, but I mean, in our lives, we accept everyone. And I hate to use the word fight, but we fight against hate. We
I think it's universally okay to say you hate hate.
you hate
I think
hate,
if the
yes.
one thing you can hate is hate.
Hate, yes. Dislike it passionately. But and there was even a woman who had a big sign, love, be kind, on her fence. And she would find it torn apart, or someone, spray painting on it.
I mean, how sad,
Why
right?
would you
Yeah.
do that?
Yeah.
And it's just like that Beatles song. What if there were no religion? What if we all
Imagine.
lived?
Yeah.
Imagine, yes, imagine a world of love,
Yeah.
and peace. But so that's what we try to educate the community. We went on a field trip a few months ago to the Cesar Chavez monument up in Keene, California. And we had the honor of being shown around and given a tour by his grandson.
Wow.
So it was really fantastic.
Yeah.
And we have lined up, hopefully soon, trip to the Cheech Museum in Riverside to see a retrospective, Judith Hernandez. We hope to go take a road trip again to the Watts Towers. We want to show people that we may come from a different culture, different background, different language, but bottom line, we're all the same.
Sure.
And saying, hey, we all live under the same sky. We all breathe the same air. Let's sit down and talk. Let's discuss things. Let's discuss our differences over a meal. And you'll see that we really are okay. We're okay.
Right.
And I remember I went up to a city council meeting many years ago, and I think it was Hispanic Heritage Month. And at that time, I brought up something because I happened to come across an old book of my uncle's, who was and still is an activist. I think he's probably close to 90 now. And he had shown us pictures of signs where it says, no dogs, no Mexicans. And I know for other cultures, it was the same thing. No dogs, no,
Whatever you want.
Whatever,
put
yeah.
it
Fill in
into
the
your
blank, whatever
fill in
you
the
want.
blank,
Right, yeah.
exactly. And this organization really just tries to let people know we're here together.
Right.
Let's just hold hands and try to help each other.
Yeah. I mean, you really do have to deprogram racism and hate and intolerance, because it's not. I've never met a child that was born hating some other race or whatever.
No,
Like
it's
taught. Yes, it's a behavior that
is
you just
taught.
learned. So it's really, really cool that that one, Zonta does this, and that you've had such a history of working with groups that have tried to propagate that and educate people and take away the specter of stereotypes in the world and get people just to sit down and have a meal. It leads me to another question. A phrase that shows up in a lot of literature that we've come across with all your stuff is the concept of social justice. It's become sort of a hot button thing, at least in the digital spaces, because there are people that literally describe themselves as social justice warriors. But how do you differentiate the type of social justice that y'all are trying to share as opposed to the sort of popular online type of social justice that anybody can post about something and say they're angry about something, but they're not really doing much? So how do y'all try and differentiate yourselves, at least Zonta, or you yourself, when trying to educate people on that?
Well, I think, and I guess it's part of each group that I belong to. We're all trying to advance humankind, womankind, and we're trying to do it peacefully. And I may just kind of veer off a little bit.
That's okay.
But
Absolutely.
to me, what Zonta does, what some of the other organizations I belong to do, we're trying to help people lift up, not keep them down. And it's, you reach back and say, take my hand and I will help you. And at some point, that person is going to be ahead of you and helping you. We, at least in the groups that I belong to, we don't denigrate. We do not denigrate. We do not think of anyone as less than. We're going to help you because you don't have anything. No, we want you to be with us, and let's make a great community. So Zonta, we try to lift women up and help them so they can help us create a better world.
Sure.
And the same thing with equality. We want to be on your side. If someone is calling you a slur or a name, you call on us, because we will stand with you, and we will take those words of hate thrown at you will also be thrown at us. We will stand with you. We're your allies. And the thing is that the people who spew the hate and want to bring people down don't realize that that there are people out there who are willing to stand with those who are being hated upon and to say, hey, we're standing with these people.
Yeah. And
we will be together.
There are more decent people on the planet than there are bigots, for sure.
Yes.
Oh, absolutely. But we're not loud.
Right. We need to be better.
The bigots are always louder.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, and that kind of leads to a question I wanted to ask, right? Is that, especially as adults, we all get so busy, right? We have jobs, and many of us have families and, kids' soccer practice and dogs and things to take care of, and we work full time. Where do people find, how would you encourage people to find the energy within them and the drive to kind of follow your example and do, what are some of the steps that people can take to find the time and energy to get involved in activism and community work like you do?
Oh, be a supporter or an ally. When organizations in which you believe have fundraisers, go get a meal and let that meal, 10% or 20% go to your organization. You all have to eat, so support the fundraisers that way. If someone puts a call out, we need feminine hygiene products because the YWCA is low. Look in your closet, see what you have, as long as it's not past date.
Sure.
Yes.
No expired products, please.
Yes, exactly.
Don't just dump your trash on the charities.
Right, exactly.
That's rude.
But you just do that.
Right.
On your way to the soccer practice. Okay, I know this person was asking for this. Let me drop that off. That helps. Everything helps, because that's one more item that we didn't have.
Right.
Because some of our members, they have children, they work a full-time job, and sometimes they take classes, and so it's really hard for them to juggle. But they'll say, hey, I have this, I leave it on my porch. Can somebody come by and pick it up? And that's what we can do. It's so simple.
How do you find your personal motivation for you to stay involved in all these incredible organizations that you're doing? I know you mentioned you had a lot of foundations in the stuff that your mother did and comments from your father and just the perspective sort of thing. But having done it so many years, what keeps you coming back? What keeps you moving towards all these things?
Because the work is unfinished. There's still so much to do. When the ERA gets signed, when CEDAW, which is the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, which was signed by President Jimmy Carter in 1976 and has still to pass Congress.
Good Lord.
Jimmy Carter really was the best president that nobody remembers.
Nobody remembers,
Yeah.
exactly. And so many attempts to get it through the judiciary, the foreign relations, everything. It has met a lot of impediments. When child marriage when 18 is the floor for child marriage, when human trafficking laws are passed through, anti-human trafficking laws are passed throughout all 50 states and all the other countries, when you can go up to someone who is not like you and just give a hug, maybe that's when the work will be almost finished. But there's still a lot of work to be done. We need more people to help, regardless of whether it's, human relations or women's issues or children's issues, child abuse. Oh my gosh, don't get me started on that. There's so much yet to be done. Those who pretend to lead us have absolutely no clue what it is to be down here where the real people are.
Sure. Yes.
And until they wake up and listen to us, our work, those nonprofits who are working diligently, they're still going to be working. They're still going to, and I'm hoping generation after generation after generation until, we actually, as Martin Luther King said, reach the promised land.
Right.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. No. So the question I wanted to ask was, for listeners either locally or all across the world, if they have that drive, they have that energy from somebody like you who has your kind of hands in a lot of different cookie jars. If someone wants to get involved but maybe doesn't quite know where to start, are there resources that can kind of help guide people to finding causes or organizations that might align with their values so they can go, oh, I care about this. Maybe I'll try this or whatever, right? Because it can be, trying to get into volunteer work can be a little overwhelming. Luckily, there are a large number of organizations that do all sorts of things. But are there resources for people who want to get started and just don't know where to start?
But then it depends on what they really want to do. Because you have people, they love animals. And if you dig down, they really love dogs.
Sure.
What can I do? How do I help? So, it's going onto social media and seeing where are those organizations.
Sure.
And the same thing, typing in women's issue, women empowerment, and you'll come up with a lot of organizations. We have Zonta, which is international, but so is Seroptimus. And sometimes it's just going to your city hall because most city halls, they allow organizations to receive proclamations during certain, big days like Denim Day or 16 Days of Activism that we have. Gotcha. And so you have organizations like Burbank Human Relations Council that just had the Harvey Milk proclamation. And so ask your city council, the city manager, someone will know of some organizations that have come before them to receive proclamations and say, hey, why don't you try this? Or why don't you reach out to this organization? Because there are so many. Yeah. Or easily zonta.org.
I was going to say, could you tell us about the 16 days of activism?
16 Days of Activism starts on November 25th, which is, oh gosh, I'm going to get this one wrong. The International Day Against Violence Towards Women. But check me on that.
That's day one? Or
that's day one, November
Okay.
25.
Okay.
And it ends on December 10th, Human Rights Day.
Okay.
And throughout the world, you can Google this, throughout the world, Zonta clubs and other organizations, colleges and whatnot, they have activities that show and educate the community on gender violence. What we have done, we have had human trafficking, anti-human trafficking speakers, like someone from the Department of Homeland Security or Human Trafficking Division of FBI. We've had them come and speak to us. We've had survivors speak to us. We have had trainings at Inspire, the karate place. And I'm sorry I had to do that physically.
No, it's all I saw. Yeah,
karate chopping effectively.
The universal symbol for karate, punching.
And so that women could help. It was empowering women how to protect yourself. So they gave us a class, and then for this coming 16 days, we are going to have our 4th annual Walk Against Gender Violence, which has been starting at the steps of police department. We walk around Glen Oaks, come down Olive, and end on the steps of City Hall. We've had Senator Portantino, Assemblywoman Laura Friedman, past Mayor Paula Devine come and speak to us on these issues, on gender violence.
Sure.
And it's the 16 days. And thankfully, the city of Burbank is such a great partner with us. It's been, I think, 6 years that I first approached City Manager Ron Davis at that time of lighting up City Hall in orange for the 16 days. It doesn't go all 16 days for us because I believe the first Saturday of December is the holiday kickoff for the holiday season. So the City Hall goes green, red, and white, and everything. But the Burbank Water and Power goes orange.
Nice.
And Nickelodeon, they usually have they're orange, but if you go
they
drive,
go orange 365, right?
But no, not really. If you drive down, their lights are very light. They're just kind of keeping them on, and sometimes they're not even on. But for 16 days, they have lit their lights orange. Yeah. And Taj Mahal has been lit in orange. The Arc de Triomphe has been lit in orange. The Sydney Opera House has been lit in orange. I mean, there are a lot of Zontians out there in the world, and they try to get some monument or something important lit in orange.
That's incredible. Wow. So for listeners, perhaps local and listeners who are, all across the country, all across the world, who are interested in kind of playing along and joining and kind of helping with the cause, where can people find a lot of this information that can lead them with there's upcoming events or any sort of thing like that, causes that they can get involved with? Where can you send people?
Well, because my preferred organization is Zonta. Those who are not in the Burbank area, they can go to zonta.org and they will find a club near their location, whether it's in Germany or France or England or Rwanda. And they find out what they are, what events they're hosting. But if you're in the Burbank area, go to zontaburbank.org and you could see what we have listed. As a matter of fact, the Zonta Club of Burbank has twice a year, April 30th is a deadline, September 30th is a deadline for a WINGS grant. It is a grant of $2,000 that we divide among applicants that we have chosen who have overcome a major life obstacle. And women need to be 21 or over. And a life obstacle for many of our women have been getting out of a domestic violence situation and starting their life over, or they've been a stay-at-home mom and want to start their education because their husband has unfortunately passed away suddenly, or they've had some traumatic event happen and they want to continue or start education. And so Zonta Club of Burbank area has this grant every 6 months to award to a person, a woman or women, depending. And I encourage anyone who has overcome a major life obstacle to apply and go on to the zontaburbank.org website.
Awesome.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
And is there any message you'd like to share with any woman or individual struggling with things, gender inequality,
domestic violence?
Like if there's a message you could send to, say, we suddenly had a microphone that could talk to everyone in the world, is there a statement you'd like to share with them?
This has been reiterated many times by other people, but you are not alone. There are women who are fighting for you. There are women who are taking up your cause. You may not see us, we may not see you, but we are working every single day diligently to make sure that women are heard, women reach that parity and equity, and that the universe sees us as equals, because we do hold up half the sky.
Absolutely.
You are not alone.
Very beautiful.
Thank you for sharing. As we kind of start to wrap up here, we wanted to just say thank you again so much for donating so much of your valuable time to come hang out with us and share a glass of wine or two. And so thank you so much. I personally feel fired up from this conversation, and it's not just the Pino Noir.
Right. Mine's maybe the Pino Noir.
A little bit, but yeah.
Well, as I said, supporters and allies. You may not want to join our organization, but when we have a march, when we have an event, you may just want to just show up and say, I'm here for you.
Yeah.
Because there is an organization, he for she. And Zonta does a lot of work with them.
There you go. As you said, it's inclusive for everybody, right? Well, thank you so much for stopping by. We appreciate it. Please give our show a follow on Instagram at 2drinkmaximum, TWODRINKMAXIMUM.
Got it.
Boom, I nailed it. We want to thank our sponsors, the Muse Rooms here in Burbank as well.
Yes.
Thank you to them for always hosting us. And we'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Cheers.